Okay, we're going to call the special work session for September the 17th, 2018 to order. And I'm going to immediately turn it over to Mr. Stuckey.
Good afternoon. We're going to spend this afternoon talking through where we are on the 2019-2028 capital investment program. A little while back, we sent out and published on the website this document that has couple hundred projects in it, but totals about $644 million worth of potential capital investment needs in our community that we project as options for your consideration over the next 10 years. So what we're going to do this afternoon, is walk through a very high-level financial overview of where we are and the resources that are available, again, with much more detail to follow in this process. Do a review of some projects, specifically what we've completed in recent years, just an overview there as well, but then the approved projects that you identified and the status of where those are at in the development process, and maybe some updated costs with elements of those as well. Excuse me. And then also talk through projects where there have been significant progress made in preparation of moving forward, but may need additional construction funding going forward. And then the TDOT projects, the Tennessee Department of Transportation funded projects that have been identified in the recent 3-year plan, and how those are positioned as well, so that we look at the whole breadth of different projects that are heading forward in our community, both city delivered and state of Tennessee. And then talk about our process for working through understanding the projects that are before you, and how we work on prioritizing and making decisions between now and really the end of this calendar year to identify the next group of capital investment projects. So let's start with our financial review. And this really, again, is a high-level overview. And we talked about this a couple years ago, September of 16. We identified cash resources in that 10-year window of about $160 million. 148 of which were what we would call internal city dollars, and about $12 million of which were other external sources, developer contribution, grant funds. If we look at that same number today, it's roughly about the same, which is impressive considering we've invested money in projects in the last 2 years, and have issued a $27 million general obligation bond issue in that time period. And those resources are, again, just a little bit below 160 million, 158 million, 145 of which we'd classify as internal city resources, and about 13 million in the grant category. So again, we will provide you with much more detail about that, but when you look at it, the bottom line is we've had additional resources come into the equation, even with projects that we've invested in the last 2 years. Thanks to the Invest Franklin initiative, additional funds that have flowed into the development-related fees like road impact, facilities fees, both city and county, and other grant dollars that we've been able to identify and obtain going forward. So as we move through the prioritization process, some of it depends on the priority projects that are identified. We look at funding strategies. We'll be refining that, giving you a sense of what your capacity is to live within the policies you put out in terms of debt, fund balance, those key elements that help us maintain our very strong financial position. So let's step through the project reviews. We talked first about the completed project, the good work that's been done. You've heard us talk, Mayor talked to the state of the city, and we've talked a number of other times in the last 5 years. The city's completed approximately $170 million worth of capital investments. Within that group, about 85% have been in the transportation realm. This is just a map representation of those projects that have been completed in approximately that 5-year window. And so you see that, yeah, about a 5-year window. Yeah. So that gives you a sense of what has happened, not just city investment, TDOT investment as well, that we have seen occur in the community. So let's talk about where we are with what we call Tier 1 capital investment projects. We grouped into the Invest Franklin initiative, which is the dedication of about 10 cents of property tax towards infrastructure and operational needs, 7 cents of which is in that infrastructure and transportation realm. And I'll turn that over to our engineering team, Jonathan and Paul, to talk through individual projects, and others of us may chime in as we give you an update on where we are and what things look like at this stage. So
The first one is East McEwen Phase 4. Originally, we estimated about 27 million. What we're seeing, and you'll see this common theme for a lot of the projects, is that right-of-way costs have significantly increased, and Jonathan and I were talking about it before. And our numbers are showing, you know, right-of-way acquisition from $10 to $20 a square foot have now gone to $35 and $60 a square foot. And so it's made it very difficult for $35 to $60 a square foot, which made it very difficult for us to estimate or project that type of an increase on it. And so with this project, we have basically the utility and plans are done. The NEPA it has been submitted. It's complete. We're just waiting now on TDOT and Federal Highways Administration to sign off on that. And once that's signed off on, we'll be able to move right into the right-of-way acquisition phase, which again is what is the big increase. There are a lot of different utilities that will be moving with that job: water, some gas lines, I'm sorry, no water, just wastewater. And water will be Mill Crofton, which we've now included in that budget as well. And so right now, we're hoping to start right away this fall. As soon as that NEPA is approved, we can really roll into the appraisal process. We put about a year on right-of-way acquisition. Just given the state and federal funds, we have to go through TDOT for approval on it. And then looking to construction of spring of 2020. And so we're still on target based on that original time frame that we had provided back when this project was approved for funding.
So you're going to see a pretty consistent structure with each of these projects, where we show you what our estimate was on the project when it was originally funded or identified, approved by the board, what our updated numbers are, what funding has already been secured or appropriated either through bond funds or cash on hand that we've identified, or in this case, $10 million grant. And then you'll see the number that is needed to complete the project, and then we try to give you a high-level sense of the funding sources that can help us hit that number. So you're going to see this same structure throughout, and then we give you sort of a red, yellow, green assessment of where we are. Like in this case, environmental's complete. Engineering is pretty far along, but we've got some elements with utilities and the final pieces of that we've got to complete, and then from there we're able to do right away and move into construction. So we try to give you a sense of where we are in the overall framework or continuum of completing a project.
Well, not to get ahead on any of this, but against your $160 million that we've got here, if we were just looking at this, $11 million you wouldn't count, 11.7. But 23.8 would be against that 60 million.
Well, we've really already netted out that 11, so the debt service that it takes to support the portion, the 1.7 million,
Okay.
is already worked into what
Okay.
you're seeing. So we've really factored in what we've already obtained, and so that 158 million is really money that can go towards, in this case, that 23 million.
23.8.
Yeah, and then whatever we look at in terms of other structures over the longer term.
Okay.
The 10-year planning horizon.
Is that whole 11 million spent?
It has not been spent, no. That is looking at the timing of, really the 1.7 million is what we expect to spend between now and 2019, just in terms of some design work, some initial right-of-way acquisition, and then you'll see us issue a significant amount more probably in the 2019 bond issue towards this project, and then you'll probably see a final piece in the 2021 bond issue for this project. So we sync them up with the timing of the project so that we're matching bond proceeds with the timing of expenditures.
And is that 1.5 million roundabout, that's the dedicated right-hand turn lane?
Yep, that's the next project. That's
Let
the
me go to that.
right-hand
Yeah, this is the diagram of that one.
turn lanes, and we're projecting right now to be able to start right-of-way acquisition this fall. So hopefully, very shortly, we'll start the appraisal process. It's one property owner, so we should be able to complete that fairly fast. With construction starting spring of 2019, we should be able to move this forward. There's no state and federal funds on it, so we have the flexibility to be able to move this one much faster. We were just updating a few utility easements, and we're about ready to go into appraisals now. So we're making very good progress on this project. Any questions on the McEwens? Those two McEwens?
Yeah. The Avalon Square, these neglected other two areas that are not red. Have you talked to Mr. Parks about what is going to be needed in those areas eventually? Maybe a dedicated right-hand turn lane coming down Cool Springs, headed south onto McEwen. And also school we're gonna get that 4-lane McEwen done to the right, to the east. Coming down that road, we have a 2-lane road that's gonna need some attention eventually. And how about, are we allowing enough land to acquire for future right turn lanes?
Yeah, so we've had traffic engineers look at this roundabout on probably about 4 different occasions. They've all come back saying the same thing, looking at the projected land use, that the only right-of-way we need are the 2 right-hand dedications that we're showing here. And so we have shared those files with Avalon Square Development. They're showing it in their development plan, so they know that this taking's coming, and they've been able to incorporate it in their development. So as they move forward with a development plan amendment, we'll have the right-of-way needed long-term for the city.
On both those other catty corners, right?
On the 2 that aren't highlighted, no.
No.
Our projections do not show us needing a separate dedicated right turn
Ever?
lane. Ever, yeah. We look 20, 30 years out with those land use
I don't know
projections,
about
and
that.
this is all part of the integrated growth plan,
Mhm.
where we went through and assigned extremely high densities all up and down Carruthers Parkway, all up and down Cool Springs Boulevard, and even south, and looked at Carruthers Parkway, McEwen, and Cool Springs Boulevard holistically, and we're just not showing the need at this point for that. And again, we've done that twice, 4 times total, but 2 times recently, and they all come back saying they're not needed.
See, I don't know, not an engineer, but I'm not sure I agree with that, coming down the hill and headed, coming down the hill, headed north, and then taking your right-hand turn going east on McEwen once McEwen is finished because of the volume of traffic. You know, we have 5 subdivisions out there right now in the county being built. We have a school over there, and we have other land out there that can be built. So we have a lot of traffic coming down there now, and I'm wondering, I mean, it's bumper to bumper in the morning.
Now, Oxford Glen, we do see a need possibly long-term to look at in making more improvements farther down Oxford Glen, but again, the right turn lane, there's no major developments happening
Okay.
out.
All right, one more question, and I'll quit on this, but if you're coming down Oxford Glen to the roundabout, in the future, then will there be enough land to do our 4-lane, to widen that because of the traffic volume that's gonna come down there? It's already there, and if we have that in the future, I'm just looking at the projections of the numbers right now and everything, and I just wanna make sure that we haven't cut ourselves short without taking the ability to have right-of-way there in the future because of the school.
Yeah, Oxford Glen, there
That's
will be
the-
right away.
That's the case,
Mhm.
is the school.
Oxford Glen, there'll be adequate right away.
There will be, coming down to take another right, to put in another right-hand, to
Probably not for the,
double.
probably
double.
not for the bypass lane, but there'll be enough to widen Oxford Glen if need be.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
All right, then the next project, and this also has some pretty significant changes from where we were 2 years ago and where we are today in terms of the project, is the Southeast Municipal Complex, the Southeast Park area in particular. When we costed this out and incorporated into our capital investment plan, we really worked on a generic park space per the master plan of about 50 acres, and then had a preliminary design plan for the Robinson Lake area. So those were the components we had before us when we set that out. And so when you look at those 2 together, that's probably around $19 million of projected cost impact from what we were working on then. The reality is, we've worked on a way to incorporate land the city already owns, to do 200 acres plus. And so that brings you a very different structure in terms of elements and cost, and it is a longer-term build-out, given all of those considerations. I'll let Mark and Lisa kind of walk you through those elements, and we also have some diagrams that you're familiar with in terms of the master plan that help show you that as well. But go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Eric. So this project, there's a lot of moving parts. That's why we wanted to provide a little context with it. As Eric had mentioned, the original concept design was for 8 multi-purpose fields on about 50 acres. We're now talking about over 200 acres down in the southeast area. And this includes the land where the proposed water reclamation facility is, as well as the Robinson Lake piece as well. So we're total property, we're about 250 acres, a little over 200 would be dedicated to park and open space areas. So when we started trying to program this larger space, Lisa and her team reached out to the public to get input. Based on that community input, we received a lot of great comments, and in part of the concept plan that which we brought to you all earlier this year, it included 10 multi-purpose fields, one to two possibly being synthetic turf fields. We are looking at inclusive playgrounds, river access, volleyball, basketball, a whole slew of different park amenities. As a result, and based on the costing out of the input that we had received from you all and from the community, the total project cost on the, I'll refer it to as the south property, is just over $31 million. One thing that's really important to consider when you're looking at this $31 million is we have the potential for a water reclamation facility on this site as well. So we looked at a handful of different items that are going to be, we would expect to be shared between water management as well as the Parks Department. Overall site work is just over $6 million. There's going to be we need to come up with terms on how to divide those costs between the two entities. Site utilities, almost $3 million. The Spine Road and Bridge, $2.5 million. And 1.3 for traffic improvements on Carruthers. So that leaves about $18.5 million in overall kind of specific park components and other construction. The Lockwood Glen Park, we have listed at $5.5 million. And we had also brought in front of with you all some concepts as well. So what's on the screen right here is the property where the proposed water reclamation facility would be, which you probably all remember.
Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt your presentation. Yes. There's two things I want to maybe make an observation of. One is to just confirm that this wastewater or this water reclamation facility, that would be an alternative, additional facility, not a replacement facility, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
because sometimes there's confusion about that.
Yeah.
Under no set of circumstances were we ever considering, or would we be able to relocate our existing wastewater plant to this location, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
This site would be for additional capacity.
Good.
Additional
Okay.
long-term capacity.
Right,
yes.
okay. And second, all the numbers that we're looking at today are high-level estimates that are subject to revision as you get into things like environmental engineering and actual, when you actually start doing bid documents and so forth.
Correct.
So these are kind of placeholder numbers,
Right.
and they might go up.
They might go up, they might go down. It depends on the ultimate scope of this project. We presented to you all a concept that the thoughts on moving forward with this concept may shift.
So nobody should in a year or three look at this and say, see, the costs or the budget's already blown up for this park if it turns out it ends up costing more.
These are the costs that we would expect based on the scope of the project at the level of design that we currently have right now.
Okay.
Current today cost.
Correct. Touch on
Correct?
Lockwood
Are you-
Glen in terms of
It
that.
probably will
Correct
go
today,
up.
because look at McEwen 4. Look at how much that has gone up, and that is due to inflation. That's due to 5, 6 years down the road. If we had built it 6 years ago, would have
Well,
been
some of it's
different.
inflation and some of it is unforeseeable circumstances. I
yes,
mean,
of
when we start,
course.
if we send out the surveyors and find out that half of that park's dirt won't compact the way we
Right.
thought it would,
Exactly.
then you get into, you know, all kinds of cut and fill. I mean, we're doing the best we can with the information we currently have.
Correct.
But it's a 30,000-foot look, not a construction drawing with a bid document attached.
Right.
Absolutely
Because
correct.
occasionally, we have these numbers read back to us as if
Yeah.
these were, they're comparing, people sometimes later compare the placeholder numbers to construction bids
Correct.
and start chirping about how the budget got blown up and it's already overrun and everything else. So I thought now would be a good time to remind people the degree of certainty that are attached to the numbers that we're looking at.
I appreciate your clarification of that. So yes, you're absolutely correct.
Do you want to make a comment, Alderman Peterson?
Yes, on the water reclamation facility, that has never been approved by any
Correct.
board.
Right. That is part of your future. This is really just to provide for it in the planning of the site, and we know that's a future decision for you all to weigh in on.
It's a possibility.
So the Lockwood Glen piece, and we'll get down to the next slide here. And let me touch on Lockwood Glen real quickly. So remember, we purchased the Lockwood Glen property in December of last year at a cost of $500,000. We are in the process, engineering's in the process of going out for requests for qualifications or statements of qualifications for going through the dam mitigation process. So as a result of that that work, it's without having that information available to us, it's very difficult to program exactly what we're going to do on Lockwood Glen. So we have a placeholder in there based on some of the amenities that we know we have discussed previously, as well as some anticipated costs of the dam improvement. So I just wanted to make sure that was.
And we think this is a pretty conservative estimate in terms
Yes.
of what we think is a worst-case scenario around what we might have to do with the dam, and that's part of what this analysis will help us show TDEC and walk through the implications of that dam and how we manage it. So that will determine, but this number does reflect what we think of as doing the greatest amount of mitigation, I guess would be the best way to say
Correct.
that.
Alderman Martin.
Is the work that's to be done on the dam to be done by the city or some other entity?
It would have to be done by the city.
So we would use our own people to.
Well, it depends on the
I'm
nature of the
sorry.
work. We may contract it out, or we may have our own people do that work. It depends.
You will very likely
Yeah.
contract that.
Yeah.
I misunderstood, Alderman Martin. My apologies.
That's
It's
all right.
the
I
city.
wasn't
The
very
city
clear.
will
We own
either
it, so it's.
we own it, so we'll do the work. Likely contracting it out. So my apologies for my misunderstanding of the question.
I wasn't clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So so that's the Lockwood Glen Park piece of it. The other piece, what's on the slide on the screen, is for proposed for phase 1. This includes 5 multi-purpose fields, a significant trail system around the park, as well as a significant portion of the Spine Road and some other amenities.
Inclusive playground as well.
Inclusive playground is part of this. We'll get to. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but so we expect the construction cost to be approximately $16 million. There is a 20% contingency in here of is that 30%? 20%. I'm sorry, 20% contingency of $3.2 million, and then design and permitting for just under $2 million, with a total of $21 million for phase 1. Currently, we have $720,000 that have been appropriated through the FY 2018 budget. And the balance, of course, is a little over $20 million. So we are we have done conceptual designs on this, which have been presented to you. We're working with consultants and staff to find the path forward, knowing that the Lockwood Glen piece is really important to understand the dam issues there, DAM issues there. My apologies. So,
That's a damn good point.
thank you, sir. Funding sources for this project, of course, the general fund, parkland, impact fees, city facilities tax. There is a component of water and wastewater, and we anticipate, just with a lot of feedback from the community, a significant amount of private participation in this project as well. So we're excited to move forward with
Mark,
this.
would you go over those again, where the money can come from? possibly?
Certainly. It's there. So general fund is one.
I'm looking, I don't see it.
Right below the
Oh,
number.
is it the next page?
I just saw you taking notes, I was trying to
Yeah.
save you the time.
Oh, sorry,
Yes, ma'am.
I must be sleeping at the wheel, sorry.
There's a lot on this
So
slide.
the general
There's a
fund-
lot of things there.
There's
Yeah.
a, yeah.
And when we say
There's a
general,
line
when
there
we say
somewhere.
general fund,
Sorry.
that is a
Thank you.
general capital, so that's a combination of cash on hand, so our general fund reserves, we've got a portion of our reserves above 45% that are eligible for pay-as-you-go capital, or debt service through our general obligation debt, which we have structured to be essentially an issue every other year to align with where we are with various capital projects that are eligible. So when we say general fund, it's a combination of general tax, cash on tax funds, general fund dollars, either cash on hand or debt service supported.
Question?
Go ahead, Alderman Peterson and Alderman Brandon.
So, what about the money that we have for those, in lieu of parkland? What, has that just been wrapped into the general fund? Or
No,
what?
that's its own portion too. We've listed that separately.
Okay.
So you got general, you got parkland, you got city facilities. Depending on the use, we might justify county facilities. We've got a number of sports teams that are interested in that,
Point. Okay.
some of those general purpose fields out there. And then because of the potential connection to a water reclamation facility, the utilities part of it as well.
The point that I wanted to say about the parkland, because I've forgotten at the moment, is that into the quadrants?
Yeah.
Correct.
So when it's time for the parks to present the parks projects, we'll be bringing those to you to show you how much money's within each quadrant and potential projects. All of the projects that are allocated as part of the Parkland Impact Fee are in the CIP plan. So you would see what all of those different opportunities are.
So when you look at project sheets, you're gonna see the quadrant it's eligible in.
And also, we talked the other day at Budget and Finance, we need to also look at that on the collector roads too.
Right,
we
right,
need to
and that's
see.
part of our discussion
Okay, good.
as we do this too.
Alderman Branch.
Just a little clarification. What is phase two? Phase one is construction, contingency, design. Give me some ideas of phase.
So it'd be more build out of the master plan. So we're thinking within that phase one, we do, I guess, 5 or 6 fields. So there's 10 fields on the master plan, so it'd be the remainder of the fields. Some of the other amenities, I'm not sure we've.
More so the amenities and the cuteness. and-
Correct. So the goal would be is that your athletics is all moved over to this part, and then therefore then that would trigger how Jim Warren would be redesigned at a later date. So to allow the baseball or another sport to be able to grow, but we're looking then at the expansion of Miracle Field as well as other baseball fields at Jim Warren. But that most likely will be part of phase two, and also kind of seeing how people would use the property.
Okay.
We've got pickleball, we've got a menu of listings, so this will come in different
So
phases.
there'll be,
And so we'll also listen to what kind of generates from the public around there of what they would like to see as far as the general amenities is concerned.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Alderman Berger.
Does hotel motel tax come in here at all?
We don't have it listed, but it
We don't
might
have
be
it
able
lit-
to pending.
It could.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let me dig into stormwater or anything else, but I was
Not
gonna list them
stormwater,
all.
no,
Thank
no,
you.
no, please.
But I did not. But I did not, and I was told not to bring that up, so
You did a good job of not bringing that up.
thanks.
I think it depends on the.
Actually, I had looked on here and seen it wasn't in there.
Hotel
To tell you the
motel might
truth.
be an option. We've tried to always align those with things that are tied into more generation of visitor activity. And obviously with tournament potentials, you
Yeah.
could
Right.
see
We
that
got a
as,
lot of
as a
tournaments.
possibility. So that
Trust
probably
me.
could be on that menu as well.
Trust me, this weekend, we were at the soccer tournaments all weekend
happens.
long. Spending money in Franklin, people were. I was telling them where to go.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll go ahead and keep us moving along here.
Thank you.
Sidewalk gaps is one of the elements we did, and this has sort of been cash pay-as-you-go, about $250,000 a year for the first 5 years of Invest Franklin. So that really is almost like a budget item that we've incorporated each year. You see some examples of those sidewalk gaps that have been completed in the last 2 years, ones that connect Columbia State Community College to McKay's Mill neighborhood and allow access up to Liberty Park, where there's satellite parking being used by the community college as well. You look at connections along Carruthers, connections along South Royal Oaks that help connect neighborhoods to shopping areas in that area. So there's sidewalk options all the way from a neighborhood like Forest Crossing to the Publix on South Royal Oaks. So those are all just great kind of opportunities we've identified to connect neighborhoods to parks, to schools, to shopping areas. And this is just a sampling of those. So we anticipate continuing to click along with those, around $250,000 a year. The next item it was in your,
Excuse me,
Mhm.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not finished with sidewalks.
okay.
All right. Lewisburg Avenue. We gotta get on that.
That is one of your projects for consideration. It's just way more expensive than $250,000.
Yeah.
So it's put in as an individual project. It's in excess of $1 million. So it's really gonna be more of its own project, just because of the size and scale of it.
Okay,
Similar to how you did Murfreesboro Road, a 96 East sidewalk, you've done 96 West projects. It's more in that type of project than these smaller gap filler type
I
projects.
cannot really though understand how it could be as much as 96 West or 96 East. With that, you mean, you can stand at one end and see the other end. It's just right there.
But it goes on
And
the
I
railroad track,
know there is a fire plug. I know there's a fire plug, and I know there's a utility pole. But
pretty
you
much-
didn't,
Those
you,
things are attached to things.
It pretty much all starts with the drainage. When you start
Yeah.
fixing the drainage on the road to curb and gutter it, you have to look what's underneath your drainage. And when you start hitting sewer and water, next thing you know, you're reworking
Gas
every
lines.
utility up there that nobody can see, which then drives your project cost up substantially. And that's exactly what happened. We had wanted to fund that one.
had you thought about putting it on the other side of the street?
No, honestly, we have not. We would have to probably extend it down to an intersection or someplace at logical termini to cross a street,
Well,
but
I
we could
know,
look at that
I
as
know
well.
you've got a sidewalk to Bob Crosby's, and that's where it stops.
Mhm.
But on the other side of the street, you've got some room.
That side needs drainage as well. This project would have provided drainage for both sides, so I don't know that we're gonna gain anything, but it's something worth evaluating. We could definitely look at that to see if there's another option. So we'll take a look at that. But it's a needed pedestrian connection. We totally agree.
And it's important to know that that never was really intended as a sidewalk gap project because it's a more involved project. The sidewalk gap money, what we really intended that for was kind of quick hit projects where generally the grading is already there. We don't have to move utilities very quickly.
I understand that. I do.
And that's the kind of project we'll discuss with you when we get into the further work sessions on specific topic areas.
And we're still primarily talking about phase one,
This is the update on where you are in tier 1
yeah.
projects.
phase one projects.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that at a later date, I'm probably going to look at another project that I think will be similar to a sidewalk issue. I mean, because it's pedestrian, but,
And we'll get to that.
We'll get to that, but I want to say that there's going to be a need for us to think outside the box with some pedestrian movement, because we talk about that all the time, and we've got issues coming in the Cool Springs area where we're going to have to really address something that is going to be beyond sidewalks. So I just want to say that up
And we're
front.
just updating where we're at with
Yes, right
Tier
now,
1.
which is not enough money in that account.
So Fire Station 7 is the next one we were going to touch on. We expect to bid that by the end of the year, if not sooner, probably in the next month or so. This is where we have obtained property from the county at the southern end of the Ag Center to provide for permanent Fire Station 7. We are working through the final transfer of that land. We've worked through the alignment, especially as it relates to electric utility in that area, and so are very close to being able to bid that project here in the next month or so. So this is, again, an entirely funded by city facilities tax project because of the nature of this expansion of our service in this area where there's so much residential growth, or it has been. And you see, right now, we've bumped that projection up to around 5.25 million. That's the number we've been carrying for the last year or so, just to be, I think, conservative on it, but it's ready for bid, and hopefully we'll start construction either end of this year, first part of next. Franklin Road, project that we have done significant design work on, or have started the right-of-way acquisition process. This looks to be for bidding probably spring, summer of next year. And the one piece you see in terms of increase in cost is, again, related to right-of-way costs that we're experiencing. So I just jumped in on that, guys. Anything else to?
No,
No,
perfect.
you did perfect. The only thing I would like to add is there's still some coordination with the bridge span that we're working through with TDOT. It may change our project limits slightly, and that's something we definitely want to figure out what those options are to bring those back to the board, of how we phase that. And we're really hoping that we can work with TDOT to expedite the bridge, just so that we don't build a brand new roadway, open it up, and they close it a few months later. So we're still working on the hydraulics associated with that, the exact costs associated with that. But as soon as that information is available, we're going to be bringing that forward to the board to help you all understand and consider.
And we've advanced some money to help that engineering happen earlier in the process so that those questions can be answered.
Alderman Peake.
And this will then include what we were going to do to improve the water, the culverts, yeah.
Actually, the bridge is
It's going, that's right, that's what I'm
it's an
saying.
arch bridge
Yeah.
rather than
The-
culverts now.
That's what I'm saying, though. This is going to take care of it.
That will help with
That'll-
on the flooding component,
Yeah.
that the culvert piece was
Because,
gonna be.
at one time, we were talking about doing something ourselves, but as it's turned out, then since they've gone on with this.
So what we're looking at, or what are our options to present those back to TDOT, and we're very close. Is it a culvert or is it a longer bridge? Then we're gonna present those costs back to TDOT and say, hey, it makes sense, let's stop the bridge right here, or stop our project right here, you pick it up, and then we make a contribution to TDOT to do the project. So we're still working through that. Hopefully, over the next 2 months, we have that
Good.
identified.
Good, 2 months.
To understand our options, yeah.
Understand the options, not build the road.
That's
Yeah, no,
that's
Bill
a
Brown.
20,000 foot view, 2 months.
Let me also just give you just a touch. We've had a couple questions in the last month or so from some residents along Franklin Road, with especially concerned about preserving trees and lessening impact with the width of the road. We are looking at that, but we're also trying to make sure we're moving forward with delivering the project. So we may come to you in the next month with a discussion or review of the design as we have it, to get some final blessing so that we know to go forward with bidding the project you want us to bid and doing the right-of-way acquisition. So there's kind of more to come, but based on the way we've designed this project, this is the projected costs, and again, expect to bid that around spring of next year. And then you see There you see the schedule. We put a high-level schedule with each
see.
of these diagrams
I
too,
see.
in the white
Okay.
box, so should have referred to that. So you see that project. And that is sidewalks on both sides of the street.
Good.
This is my favorite slide because the price has gone down. The projected price on this project has gone down. This is the lighting at the Goose Creek interchange. This is a 50-50 grant arrangement with TDOT. And again, we're projecting that to be a $230,000 less than the original projection at this point. And then you see that construction is probably next summer.
That's the hope.
Realistically.
It's really under TDOT's control, so we kind of check in with them every few months to see where it's at, and that's their projections that they're providing. We're ready. It's literally 4 plan sheets. It's the bid document.
It's,
So
it's not a lot of building of, it's not like building the road. It's
No.
putting lighting in place. This is the Mallory Station, Royal Oaks, the intersection improvement piece that we funded really only the initial engineering and right-of-way, so I'll let Paul and Jonathan talk through that with you.
yeah, so we recently had a public meeting, got a lot of good input from that public meeting. Now that we have a preliminary design, we've put some numbers to the right-of-way acquisition, which is a lot higher than what was anticipated. We actually have a survey, so we can see how much right-of-way is needed. We got some comments about bike and ped facilities, so we can try to value engineer that project. There were also other options that were brought up, and so the intention with that project is to bring it back to the board and have a discussion about what happened at the public meeting, the feedback that we got, and then get your all's direction from it. But the biggest cost, again, with this area has been the right-of-way acquisition is what's driven that cost up substantially. And so the construction was not funded, it was just engineering and right-of-way, and so we're just trying to get the right-of-way done so that we can get the construction and hopefully be out ahead of this
We do
project.
plan to bring you a concept design so that you can give us guidance on if that's the design you're comfortable with before we get further down the road. So when do you expect us to bring that forward, just ballpark?
We will very likely bring forward what we presented to the public first and
Okay.
show you their comments before we start
Mhm.
editing anything and spending more money in design. I would say after that, probably within the next 2 or 3 months after that, we would bring back what we consider the final design based on your direction.
I was gonna bring back are you gonna present some of the comments about roundabouts?
Yeah,
there?
there was a lot of comments about roundabouts, and as Jonathan said, before we go spending a lot of time and money that we have associated with this contract, we really want to bring it back and have a holistic discussion of, do you want us to go down and look at roundabout options for the intersection?
Definitely do.
There are pros and cons both ways, and we would need to do some more traffic analysis and even look at what a concept of a roundabout would look like there. So we want to put all those public comments together to bring them to y'all to give us that direction
Before we change anything.
before we spend
Yeah,
any money.
I would just say that one of the comments, many of the comments actually I received afterwards, and the talk amongst the constituents and the people that live there, a lot of those people understood that when we have traffic issues around town, when we have to put in new intersections, we have to put up a stoplight here and a stoplight there, and pretty soon, this board's looking at a stoplight here, there, everywhere. And if we don't start looking outside the box on some of these things, we're gonna be having a stoplight every other corner in our entire town. And it just bogs down the traffic, and it doesn't answer the question of trying to get rid of some of this gridlock that's occurring in different areas. And the more we have development over here, when this is developed for, the Cool Springs area is designed for density. And the more dense we continue to make it, we've got to have different solutions. So I just wanted to put that out there while we're thinking about it, why those things would be good for us to look at in the future when we have an opportunity. I hate retrofitting, but at the same time, sometimes that's necessary. And then other areas that don't have much there and you have more open land, that's the best time to put them in.
Just my one comment for that intersection would be that there are 1,000 16 and 17-year-old drivers coming through there, so maybe we
Right.
get Centennial's input as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Cause I'll have two of them
Yeah.
go through there pretty soon, so.
And compare them to I will be careful how I say this, but young people learn very quickly, and they know how to drive those areas a lot better than older adults, I would say.
But a major
Because-
source of that traffic is right there. We'll make
But,
sure we
but
talk
you're,
about
but
that.
you're right, you have a lot of them there, but,
After we bring
We
the
really need
information
to
back
take
to
a
the
look
board
at
for
it.
comments, we're also planning on sitting down with those property owners. It's kind of one of those unique situations where we can sit down with 3 or 4 property owners, and it's pretty much the entire corridor.
Right,
So actually, the property owner for the apartments was actually at the meeting, so
Two.
that's half of them.
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he owns 2 corners,
Yeah.
that's right.
This next item is actually, you notice it doesn't really have the Invest Franklin component on it because it really came through the budget process in our FY '18 budget and identified some needs for, essentially it was originally kind of roadway or network improvements around the road network, around Century Court and the transfer station and those elements. But as we also identified it as, bond funded eligible because of the long-term nature of those improvements. But as we look at it more, we have identified with those improvements the need for some drainage elements, and Mark may want to touch on that in terms of, that's driven that cost up potentially as well, so that's something, we've got a portion in there, but to do all that probably should be done, we need to look at expanding that and probably integrating it into our broader capital plan, so.
Sure. Excuse me, there are really 2 elements to the expansion of this scope, one of which is water line connection into the Shadow Green development adjacent to the transfer station facility. The other one, as Eric had mentioned, there's a stormwater facility in the transfer station that is in dire need of work. So we're, based on the complexity of how it was previously designed, we need to make some modifications to it so it's better for future operation and maintenance of that facility, so.
Do we have enough land up there for what we need?
It's actually, we've had some ongoing discussions about how to program that property in the future, so that's something we'll be talking with you all. I'm not sure the exact time frame on that.
We're always looking at how that's configured, and, you've got training facilities there for police and fire as well, and you look at their needs long-term, you look at some of these components in terms of especially the sanitation environmental service suite of services and what we might need long-term there, so, yeah, we'll have some proposals for you going forward on how to maybe modify how that's working and how it maybe helps us work with some of the challenges we see in the future.
That's good because, as long as there's vacant land around, don't let it get eaten up and then we need it.
No, I understand. There's been some preliminary discussions on, we've not come to any conclusions on recommendations, but we're looking on that site and trying to weigh options really everywhere, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next piece that we integrated in our Invest Franklin initiative was a couple years of specific funding on major streets and resurfacing there. You sort of our local high-volume streets, and you see what we've completed thus far or are in process of completing at Baker's Bridge and Cool Springs, Royal Oaks last year, working on another component of Cool Springs and Liberty this year. And so, that's an ongoing project. It's largely funded through our 2017 GEO bonds, but we got a last portion that we will source going forward, either through the 2019 bonds or through available cash resources in our general fund.
Alderman Martin.
Is this just, I noticed that it's mostly in Cool Springs. Is that where it's needed most, or is that where it just comes up on the schedule?
Well, I think that's where it's come up on the schedule thus far. So those are the major roadways that we're starting to tackle. There's not a specific focus on Cool Springs though, so it just happens to be that's what has been needed. on the
Age,
front.
condition. We do a pretty regular assessment of our local streets, both neighborhood streets and these larger, collector and local arterials. And so this just synced up with what the needs were identified. And we also tried to do it in a way too, where we did a fairly large stretch of that road and got that completed as opposed to doing smaller segments in multiple areas. So we tried to do it logically based on getting a good size stretch of road updated, upgraded. So.
Does that include any neighborhood streets at all?
This
Or
is
is
all
that-
intentionally major streets. We do the annual program on neighborhood streets that we've beefed up to over the last couple years. We've increased that nearly 30% in our funding on neighborhood streets, but these are larger volume,
Gotcha.
collector and arterial streets, locally funded streets that needed this.
And the intent was
additional
to do a
support.
little bit larger of a project at one time. So
Mhm.
for instance,
Yeah.
Royal Oaks, normally our annual program, if you did that, that would eat up half of our annual programming for a year versus with a major street, we can actually focus that on a large section of roadway.
Gets us a better value because we're doing a larger
yeah.
project too.
Alderman Berg?
So Liberty, it says 2018, are we coordinating that with South Star? Because they're getting ready to 4-lane from Carruthers to the college.
Yes, we would not pave that portion.
Yeah,
No,
Joe's very.
No, but I mean, are we doing that in conjunction? I just don't know if I want everything going on at one time.
Generally speaking, Joe is and his team are very good about talking with utilities and making sure if they have upgrades, they get done, and working with developers as to where their limits start and stop, and we can overlap a little bit and get our section done, and they can come back and finish it. So
Yeah.
they do a very, very good job of that and spend a lot of time doing that
Well,
as well.
that's one of the reasons they haven't done it yet, and the other reason South Star hasn't done their 4-lane from Carruthers to college is because Mel Crofton and Mallory Valerie over there doing all this work, and they wanted to wait till that was done. So I was told that this fall, they're supposed to start 4-laning. So I was just wondering if you can coordinate, talk to Joe about when Liberty's gonna be done, so sort of coordinate that either together or one right after the other, or is it feasible to do it together? I don't know. I just-
Probably not together because it would
'cause-
most likely be separate
And
contractors.
we
I
do.
do know that,
Yeah.
but the thing is, I don't know if it's a good idea, because you're gonna have, when that's being done, people are going to wanna go a different direction. So that part of Liberty is gonna get really a lot of traffic on it.
And the 4-laning of Liberty Pike is gonna be it's gonna be at least a year type project. The work that Joe does is typically 1 weekend,
1 week.
milling it, paving it, getting out of
Okay.
there. So, and it may
Yeah.
not be, maybe 2
Maybe a
weeks,
little
whatever.
longer than one weekend.
It's really just trying to go in, get out as quick as he can.
Oh, there he is.
Joe's hearing all this. He and his team do a really good job of coordinating
soon
this
can you
work
do
with
that,
other
Joe?
elements. So, yeah, we'll
Yeah,
make
okay,
sure that's
thanks.
part of this.
Sedative now that he heard that weekend.
That's
All right.
Paul will be
Yeah,
out there helping him.
Let's talk about that.
Other duties.
One last project in the Invest Franklin group, we funded the public safety radio upgrades. There was one component, we added additional subscriber units, meaning the individual units that our police and fire personnel have. That was equipment that was nearing the end of its useful life, so it didn't make sense to go reprogram old units when we could buy new and really extend the useful life longer. So we already incorporated that additional cost in our FY19 budget as part of what you've approved on the operating side. So we kind of filled that gap already. And that is a project I would expect to be complete by the end of the fiscal year, at least for Franklin, where the Franklin radio system will be fully on the upgraded system. So the next piece, we want to talk about reviewing projects where there are final elements, especially construction elements, that are not funded, but that where we've made significant investments and advanced those projects that might be ones that because of that deserve serious consideration in your funding going forward. I'll have kind of Jonathan and Paul walk through those, the 96 West multi-use trail, next piece.
Okay, so the 96 multi-use trail, we've received federal funding through TDOT of about $1.8 million. Our current estimate's about $5.2 million. And really, from Fifth Avenue over to 11th, we're basically building a lane. We're gonna have to curb and gutter it to stay out of those businesses' front yards. And that's part of driving the cost. There's other costs associated with some water mains that need to be relocated. So the water department's been participating in the project, and right now we're acquiring right away for the job, looking to try to get to a notice to proceed from TDOT for construction. This summer is our goal, so that we don't lose that federal funding, but we need to make sure that that
Yeah,
funding.
there is a deadline on this grant, so we really do need that to start next summer.
And
So
so
we're
we're,
running
we're,
from-
we're pushing to meet that deadline, but we also need to make sure that you all are still comfortable with proceeding with the project.
So the 5.3 is from Fifth Avenue to, say, Carlisle?
It'll be from Vera Valley Drive, where the current trail stops in front of the school, all the way to Fifth
So
Avenue.
Freedom Middle, all the way into downtown.
But it will connect, the existing trail goes out to Carlisle today, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
One side of the road.
One
Yes.
side of the road.
that's right.
Just dropping that home, sorry.
Well, I had mentioned that the other one had it on both sides before, so.
I heard. One to one.
I thought you probably heard that, yeah. Harlansdale, this is the recently learned of the $2 million grant from the state. It's about a $3 million project, so the remaining million needs to be identified. There's been a lot of discussion on how this could be a potential public-private partnership in terms of how Friends of Franklin Parks might be a really good option here. It does also have eligibility for, as you see, for a number of other, it has general fund on there too, but a lot of other non-general fund components. So that's one we'll be developing. I don't know that we have a hard deadline on that timing since the grant was just announced. but-
It'll be very much like the previous TAP grants. It'll be 3 years from the date the funding was awarded, so.
Okay. So we've got to get it done in a 3-year window.
And that's to get to the notice to proceed for construction. So we're actually right now doing the RFQ process to select a consultant, all required by FHWA and TDOT. Once we get a consultant on board, then we'll start the environmental and design. We can run those concurrently, work with other organizations, hopefully to handle some of the easement acquisition that's needed. And this should be a fun project. But we got a lot of work to do. We still have to do the bridge hydraulics to make sure that we can make the hydraulics work. And so we're moving as fast as we can on that one.
What's the date you have to have it done by?
It's
Basically,
generally,
3 years from, we don't have to have it
3 years
done
from
by
now.
3 years. We have to have construction started 3 years from basically
Oh.
July.
Of this July?
Yeah, basically, roughly. We'll know exactly when we get the contract from TDOT, but
We'd
typically
love it
3
if it
years.
were done by then.
Very likely
We
won't
would
be,
too.
just because of process, but,
We'll do our best to.
yeah.
Let's look at Long Lane overpass. This is one, of course, we worked with TDOT a few years ago to put the overpass, the piers in I-65 while that work was going on. We did enough preliminary design to be able to identify how that would work together. These are the costs we project going forward, and there are other roadway improvements staff has identified that may well make sense to do while you're doing the overpass. So I'll let Paul and Jonathan walk through that with you.
so we've broken it up into different colors just to show you what we've been at least looking at. You have, obviously, the red section's what's always been shown as the Long Lane overpass. When TDOT did I-65, we had that agreement with them where they built part of Long Lane for us. And so that leaves that little blue gap section that would not be improved. To us, it just made sense if we're going in there doing this size of a project, we should also do that blue section as well. This would also take into consideration the water mains that need to be upgraded and the reclaimed water line that needs to be upgraded, so we could get that all done as one project and complete that. The other thing, high level, we've been looking at is that purple section. Some of that does go into the county, some of it's in the city. But once we put this bridge in, we really need to fine tune our traffic numbers and guesstimate which way traffic distributions will go and change. And it largely is an educated guess to try to make those decisions and really look at, is a signal going to be warranted there and needed from day one? What we'd like to try to avoid is, everyone remembers when McEwen Phase 3 roundabout opened up, we suddenly had a large traffic problem right there that didn't exist before, and it generated a lot of complaints. So if this is a project that moves forward, we would need to look at that. For the purple section, the signalization, we show a big number, like 2.3 million is what we're showing. We could look at different options of what does it take just to put a traffic signal there. Does the county want to participate because some of it's in the county it's our urban growth boundary. So we really need to just take a better look at that. And then the other cost for the red, again, the main driver of why it's increasing is that right-of-way acquisition is gonna be very expensive. This is expensive real estate. And those numbers continue to climb.
The next item is the East McEwen extension, or what we sometimes call McEwen 5. Importance on this one is, this is where we've got an arrangement with the city of Brentwood that this would be jointly funded. Initially, when that agreement was developed many years ago, those funds were envisioned to come from developers. Since then, there's been litigation and other issues around that really have made that a joint funded project between the cities. And so when and if Brentwood identifies their half, then that would trigger an obligation for us to move forward with that road and construct it from when the funds are provided within 24 months. So we have done largely all the design, and we understand and have been communicating with Brentwood on that they may be looking to include funding themselves somewhere in their capital planning horizon, which is in the 5-year window. I don't know if we have an exact year yet, but they're still working on that, and they've given us sort of a heads up that they are looking to incorporate that in what they use as a capital planning window of 5 years.
Let's don't push it.
So we may not have a choice, but we are communicating about it.
You repeat that.
Yes.
Okay, repeat that we don't have a choice.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, once the threshold is met and the funding is provided, we, by agreement, have said we will deliver that road in 24 months.
And the big caveat to that, this particular project, the big swath that you can see on the project sheet is the Columbia Gulf gas lines. Those are gonna have to be modified in some way, or we will be required to modify those in some way. So that'll be something we look at phasing this project and completing the design right of way and at least modifying those gas lines as required by Columbia Gulf before we start roadway construction. Otherwise, this will hold us up.
One of the things
What
we did,
color is the swath?
The clear,
the area where there's,
Okay.
see that
I'm looking
path
for
through
red
there?
or black.
No.
And that's one of the things we've discussed with Brentwood is it would make sense to deal with that and take that off the table sooner and not try to do that within the 24-month window. Theoretically, we agreed that would be a shared, that would be part of sharing that cost, and that, if we looked at doing that, say, in the next year or two, that we would split that cost,
That's like
advance
$1
that
million.
50/50 as part of the project, because it is part of the project. So we are looking at how we might try to take care of that element before we get into the construction phase.
So you go over that gas line?
we would go over,
That's
but we
like-
would also be required to upgrade it, the actual type of
Well,
line.
just to go over, it's like $1 million.
To upgrade it, the last estimate we had was about $3 million to upgrade those lines.
And that's already incorporated in the project cost.
Oh, lordy be.
So that's an $18 million project that the city would pay City of Franklin and Brentwood would pay $9 based on these estimates. The other piece, as I talked about at the beginning, is just to highlight the projects that are identified and funded through TDOT's 3-year plan and other plans, bridge maintenance plans, and you just see those highlighted. We've got the 96 East improvements that's in the 3-year plan. Last number I saw on that was somewhere around 38 million, but these are state numbers and we don't always get updated numbers on what those are like. We've got the Mac Hatcher Southeast component, which is not funded for construction yet, but is in the 3-year plan for environmental, and I thought preliminary engineering. You just have environmental here, but I thought I saw preliminary
It's the first
engineering.
phase, yeah,
Okay.
it's all the same.
So at least it's in the pipeline in terms of their funding and activity there. You see both the East Main Street Bridge, the Franklin Road Bridge over the Harpeth, and the 96 East 3rd Avenue Bridge over the Harpeth. Both those are identified. We talked about those a little bit earlier, especially the Main Street Bridge. And then Columbia Avenue, we've been talking about, that's a $20 to $25 million project, fully funded by federal money and TDOT money. And then finally, of course, the Mac Hatcher extension, and that's probably somewhere around $50 million going from Hillsborough Road to 96 West. And, you know, as we talked about previously, we're looking to have that in the bidding either end of this year or first part of next year to move forward, and that final property issue is now in the hands of the property owner with an offer. So that will sort of determine what we need to do from there in terms of acquiring it, but we expect to bid that no later than the first part of next year.
Mayor,
And here you see the map.
I just wanted to tell you what I observed on Columbia Avenue the other day. A woman had crossed the street to get a drink at one of those restaurants, and she was trying to get back across, and she didn't know what to do. She was at a corner, but there was no place for her to walk, and she was just going around and around in a circle, just trying to figure out how she could get back to her office or wherever she was going. We definitely need those sidewalks. I mean, there are people who are going to be killed on Columbia Avenue with that, maybe on both sides, I think.
Especially with 5 lanes.
So where do you think she was coming and where was she going?
She got over there and she couldn't get
She got
back?
over there, but she couldn't get back. Maybe somebody drove her over there, I don't
There's
know.
no place to walk either. She'll stop and
She
check
couldn't
in
walk.
over it.
Want to stand up just a second before we move on?
Suits me.
Do a
Yeah.
little
Take a little stretch break.
Jumping jacks?
Take a deep
Up on the mayor.
breath.
Ready, go.
Exhale.
Do your doctor.
Hey, we need to do this in the middle of our work session.
All right, that's enough. Not that much left, so that's good.
So, let me talk through the process as we like to propose it going forward. First, we have a couple things we'd like to ask you to do through the end of September. And the first one is a little bit unique, but I think it'll really help us. Let me explain why. We'd like you to identify for us, if you could, by the next BOMA meeting. So next Tuesday, your top 3 non-water sewer projects. So that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to keep that as your top 3 forever. What it helps us do, these are all fairly high-level projections around projects. If we get a sense about what's most important to you, that'll help us focus in on both what we present to you, but also we can start refining those higher priority projects now in terms of schedule, timing, funding options. So if you can give us, just take water and sewer out, but anything else you see in those books, just tell us what your top 3 is.
And that's of everything, including?
Everything not including water and sewer.
No, but
With
I
no
mean,
budget numbers, like,
No budget numbers, just tell us what you're most interested in. We
So,
will
okay,
do,
don't
ultimately, we will do a final prioritization that is similar to what we did last time, which would be around dollar amounts. Okay?
okay.
But this
just-
time, just to start off, give us your first blush of the 3 that you think are most important. It won't
anything.
be necessarily what we use to finalize the plan, but it helps us
Good.
focus in on refining projects that are important to you. And also, when we present to you in the different categories, we'll have a sense of what you've identified as being at least of most interest.
And we'll be sure to include those in the presentation.
Yeah, we'll let you know too what we're seeing, but, you know, it will just be sort of to help give us an ability to focus in, because we've got, like I said, over 200 projects in here. If we can start to get a sense of what the highest priority projects are, we can refine them, and that'll help us, we think, better present it and better help you when we get to the more detailed prioritization later in the process.
Well, when we look at this and we're saying the top 3 non-water sewer projects, I mean, to really, I mean, all of us have our favorite projects probably we'd like to see done. Every ward alderman probably has projects in their ward. But should we not look at, to be more logical about it, to say, where are the real needs as far as the high growth areas and what's happening, or the infrastructure that is totally run down, or
And
dire
that's
need.
already been done as
How-
part of this project.
Yeah.
You've got 4-star ratings from staff, 3-star ratings from staff. Those are the
And
kind of
those are
things
still
we
standing.
looked at in terms of needs, in terms of what's been identified in different
All right,
comprehensive planning efforts. And that will absolutely be part of the final prioritization, for sure. But we really want this to try to help us refine projects sooner, because otherwise we're refining those projects later in the process. If we can start at least on some of them, that might help us advance our thinking and give you more detail. And it won't be what we're making final decisions on. It just helps us do a little advance work on important projects.
And the
Doesn't-
next section helps kind of further that too. What we had planned on presenting, just time-based, was to present you the 3- and 4-star projects, and then anything else you
Right.
tell us is important to you.
right, because I was gonna say, if there's a 1 or 2-star project in there that something has changed to move that up, you know, sometimes something would change to move something up. But, yeah, that's true. But I think we should take a look at what you have at 3 and 4 to say, you know, and if there is something 1, 2, we need to come and justify it.
Right. Let me
All right.
kind of walk through
Well,
this,
yeah,
that might help. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're not including the ones that we already had.
Yeah, I would say you're not gonna
Well, so
include.
tell it, you
a-
know,
a
we might
prior-
need to say
a
again
already
what those
funded
are.
project. If it's in tier 1, you don't need to
Yeah.
include it again. We've
But-
already identified it, we're
that's
moving
done.
forward.
But I'm saying, where's the tier 1 list here?
That's the list we just went through.
Okay,
We can give you a summarized list for sure.
yes,
We can give
please,
you
please do that.
But that's what we've gone through, and we can reissue that list for you. Those projects are generally not in your CIP listing.
That's it right
Those are completed projects, so we'll give you a list, but it's,
Yeah.
you know,
I
we've
had,
Because-
shown that a
I
number of
had-
times, but we'll
Because
show
a
you
lot,
that
a
again.
lot of this though, but a lot of these are not, I mean, you know, they're still to be constructed,
We'll get
even
you-
though they were the tier
Yeah.
1.
We can get you a list, but we've also got in the book, they actually do show as 5-star projects, which the
So if
list
it-
will be easier.
Oh.
If it's got a 5-star on it, 5-star
in
is
your
by
book.
definition approved by the board. Okay, you have
Okay,
authorized us to
okay.
move forward on it.
Alderman Barnett.
I think that you may have answered the question. I mean, if it's already, if it's in this list right here, we need to exclude that, but you're gonna provide us the
Right.
list
Yeah.
to exclude from, and then we add the 3
Yes.
projects to
Right.
that list.
We can give you a list to check mark for
Right.
us.
Okay?
And we'll
Yeah,
make it
we
easy
don't
that way.
wanna be,
Okay, so we'll send something out to you this
Good,
week
thank you.
that you can just give us a check mark on, and
Yeah.
it'll give you a summary on
Okay.
it, and then all the detail that we have is in this book as well.
So Southeast Park would be checked off.
I don't think you need to prioritize that.
Right.
Now, we may talk about how much funding
right.
we can afford to put in and how to phase that, but for the purposes of this process,
Yeah.
and again, this is not a final decision, 3 prioritization.
Right.
It helps us focus in on what's important to you among projects that have not been funded yet.
Like, I'm in trouble for something I couldn't.
So I'm confused.
Brandy, you want to sit here next time?
No.
Alderman Blank.
So my question would be, not that, and it could have been answered, City Hall. We financed last year wasn't that part of our top 10?
Yeah, no, really didn't. What we did is a needs assessment, so that is an unfunded project. You
Okay,
need to
I'm just-
consider
'cause
that.
in my mind,
Yeah.
that was part of our list.
Anything we haven't funded construction on, you need to consider.
Okay.
And we'll make sure that's a clear list for you.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
something like Long Lane,
That's right.
that needs to be in your consideration. Even though we've spent money and done other work, construction is not funded.
Understood.
So we need you to weigh in on that.
It has no construction funded.
Right, right. So
Or
we'll make
still,
sure you have a
that's good.
comprehensive list of what we're talking about. But tier 1 projects really don't need to be in that. They will eat up some capacity financially.
Oh, yeah.
But for the purpose of this, we need you we were asking you to weigh in on those to help us focus what we present to you and what we start refining in terms of projects. So if we could get that top 3 list by next BOMA meeting, that would be great. Anything else you have, you know, we've had you all generate projects from your own observations that are not in our list. If we could have those by the end of September, that would be great. If you have other things you've just been thinking about, you don't see in there, If you can identify those, flag those for us, we can start building a project worksheet on that.
Gotcha.
So if there's something that just is missing, we'd love to have that by the end of September. We can still take them as we do the breakout meetings, but, you know, the sooner we get them, the sooner we can start doing at least some preliminary project work on it in terms of ballpark costs and schedule and that kind of stuff.
And on that note, I will say that we did receive 2 or 3 of them that have been added, so we'll make sure that goes out with the sheet that we provide to Eric.
Question, are water and sewer projects that, that will be excluded, would that be stormwater also?
I would ask you to incorporate stormwater.
So in other words,
Since we don't have enough funding in the stormwater, I think you ought to have it compete with other general fund funded projects.
okay, so in other words, everything that's not strictly water. is
Everything that is
strictly
not
sewer.
a
Correct.
water and
That
sewer
is.
utility funded project.
Because those are, those are, funds that don't get tax money.
Right, right.
Right.
So, I mean, given where we have projected that fund, I think you need to include it for this, purposes of this exercise with that.
But as we say, the water and the sewer funds are really not tax
Right.
supported.
Yeah, they're their own kind of universe, so,
And so stormwater, even though it brings some money in, just like anything else, it still has to be.
and
tax-
often it's integrated with other projects too, so I'd go ahead and include those.
Okay.
Ready to talk about October?
Sure, I think,
Well, I just want to ask you, is the traffic signal at West Haven considered approved? Is it, now, Jimmy hasn't not put it in yet. It's not in.
it would
We'll
not
let
be
him
on,
know.
it's not on the list. It's not, you don't need to consider that. We're moving forward with that. We have an agreement to fund that through impact fees, and the city's gonna implement that, so you don't need to consider
When
that.
to when?
What's that?
When?
As soon as we possibly can do it. Jimmy has to go now and get to work on it.
He has to get the parts out of his trunk now.
So let me talk through the rest of this process. What we would like to do is do 4 more breakout meetings by category. Okay, so transportation, dedicated meeting to transportation, dedicated meeting to parks, dedicated meeting to water and sewer, and then kind of a catch-all with facilities and other projects that don't fall in one of those categories. I would suggest a meeting not unlike today. If we could do it 1 a week in October, that would be ideal. We would spend an hour and a half, 2 hours maximum. Like I said, we would structure it a little bit like we do budget, where we have staff present a structured review, no more than 30 minutes, largely focus on the 4 and 3-star projects that staff has identified and why. Anything else we saw from your top 3 prioritization that might be helpful, any new projects that you've identified or asked us about, and then turn it over for the remaining hour to hour and a half for just your discussion, your questions, specific projects you want us to give you more detail on. And we'd like to do that through October, and use that to focus in on specific categories. Then use November to get us towards a prioritization, a dollar amount target like we used last time, or targets. We will by then also, in conjunction with that, give you a financial model update that gives us a better sense of our capacity and how much we might be able to put towards projects. And again, that starts to be refined based on the projects that are rising to the top of the list too. So the prioritization helps us. And then end of the year, first part of next year, we would like to get that next tier of capital investment projects identified, looking towards starting our bond issuance in 19 and moving forward from there. So that's our goal in terms of process. I know we're asking you for a lot of meetings in October, but I think there's some real merit to doing that consistently and going through projects in a fairly close order so that we have some continuity as we talk through them, and gives you a chance too to focus in on a group, have the meeting, focus in on the next group, and then we can start refining it from there. So,
Alderman Bransford.
A little bit different subject.
yeah.
Timing of the signalization, I know there's been some communication. timing, improving the timing of signalization
yes.
within our
Okay.
city in high-traffic areas.
So we do at least.
Can you
one-
talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people is concerned about
Sure.
that, and I think we need to.
We kind of do that systematically. We do a one corridor a year. This year, we're able to do an extra one because we got some grant money. It's called congestion mitigation air quality money. Jonathan, you want to talk about that
Last
specific?
few
project?
years, so last year, we actually completed the Columbia Avenue signal retiming of Columbia Avenue. We also did multiple signals in downtown, so we did downtown area, and actually implemented some pedestrian changes to make it more pedestrian-friendly on Main Street. One of the things we're looking at doing this fall, as Eric said, we got a grant for congestion mitigation and air quality grant, so traffic improvements to Murfreesboro Road. We know because it's a grant process, it's gonna take a little bit longer, so with our annual upgrade money, we're gonna go ahead and focus on Murfreesboro Road and the Royal Oaks corridor,
Yeah.
and look at those signal timings this fall. So that's what we're focusing on this year.
So we try to pick something off every year as part of our regular budget, and then just keep going through them sort of systematically so that we can look at
To look at it.
And-
changes and
no,
updates.
And generally recommended practice is to retime a major corridor every 3 to 5 years, depending on how busy the corridor is. We try to focus that on more like 3 years.
The other piece too, that one of the grants that we have with traffic operations is the adaptive signal piece, which should help that work more real-time, over time, as we get those components in place.
I don't remember seeing any top in this. Am I wrong? I don't remember seeing any top.
No, they were removed from this year's.
Yeah, that's what I
We're
thought.
focusing on the adaptive and finishing out some of the ITS grants that we have, get those done before we started adding more to the list.
And but you know, some of the things we've gotten about were about Maori and, in the Cool Springs area, and it is bad. That
And I can
definitely
offer
did.
that was retimed holistically, the Cool Springs area in 2016.
But
So
it's
it's due-
still,
It's
Still
coming due.
doesn't
It's
work.
coming
Due.
due.
No.
Yesterday.
One of the things too with TOC in particular is a lot of times what we've done is we've identified match money. A lot of times those are 80-20 grants. So we've identified match money in the operating budget and then pursued grant opportunities and then folded it into your operating budget. So it kind
And we've
of
done that
falls
for a long time.
outside
that
of
for
this
many years.
process a little bit, but you know, depending on the right grant, it might come in here, come into play, but generally it's worked more through the operating budget.
Because they're not huge, they're typically not huge ticket items.
Along with the traffic signals, I want to ask, in other areas, not in Franklin, I don't think, there's an opportunity for left turn arrows, not red, but left, yellow, which gives you the right to turn if there's
Got
no
it.
oncoming traffic.
Got
A
'em.
classic example is Columbia Avenue southbound, turning left on to McHatcher. If the northbound traffic is coming into town, lots of times there's not any, lots of times there's a lot of traffic, but a lot of times there's not any traffic there. You sit there, there's no one coming northbound, but there's the left turn arrow is red. Now, the southbound straight through traffic is green, and I'm sure that the northbound traffic is green also. But there's plenty of places here that if you had the opportunity to turn when there's no traffic, even though there's a red, no left turn arrow, you could eliminate some of the traffic and move it through.
So I believe
We've got it, yeah.
what you're alluding
We got
to
it.
is a flashing yellow arrow.
Yeah,
So we have those at Fieldstone Parkway
that's
and
right.
Hillsborough Road. We also have them at Duke Drive and General George Patton on Mallory Station Road.
That's right, that's right. And that's good, they're good.
Conventional wisdom and what we've seen to date is those are typically only applied where single turn lanes exist, so not where multiple turn lanes exist. There are some studies in North Carolina to implement flashing yellow arrows on dual left turn lanes because you're crossing more lanes there. That's not something we're comfortable implementing here
So-
yet. It's still being studied at a high level.
So if you're going Murfreesboro Road, eastbound, and you're turning on McHatcher, you've got 2 lanes that are turned. You would not do that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Is that
If
what
you're
you're saying?
approaching
Because that's
if
a
you're
place
eastbound,
that
it's a
you
single
often
lane.
see.
So that'll be one of the things we look
You-
at with the
someplace you
congestion
often see.
mitigation and air quality grant is actually improvements, not just timing, but improvements along the corridor. That's one of the things we'll be
Yeah, I
looking at is
think- I
operational
think-
improvements.
So the double left turn lanes, we're not doing that at this point because of safety concerns until those studies are all complete.
And that's probably a TDOT question as well at that location.
Because the 2 that I've just mentioned are double left turn
Yeah, yeah.
lanes.
Yeah, we would not do that today.
I've sat there and said, why, thinking, it's red, there's no one in sight. Not,
Yeah,
that's
what we
much
see
less
there is,
coming.
it's called a protected only phasing, so it only turns when the green arrow comes up. That's typically what you'll see on a dual pocket turn lane.
One other thing I would say is, you know, when I used to go out 96 East every morning, there's sometimes whenever there's all this traffic on 96, and you have to stop at every little
Yeah.
intersection going across there, whenever they're coming from a commercial area, you know, I mean, where they're coming.
There's kind of a philosophical debate there without getting too deep into it. You either can move traffic on a main line or you can be equitable among all phases. Generally, whenever we try to move traffic along a main line, we get inundated with calls that I can't get out of my business. So we have to balance those the best we can. So as you can imagine with timing, it goes all the way around the perimeter. If we're making the side streets hold for too long, they complain. If we make the main lines hold for too long, they complain. So we try to balance that as best we can.
But we need to get them synchronized, though, is what I'm trying to say. On the long one, you need to get them kind of synchronized. I mean, really, you don't need to have to.
That's what we do every 3 years, and it is time for Murfreesboro Road.
As I say, I can
Yeah.
remember over
And-
the years, you know, a few years ago, complaining a good bit, and sometimes it could get done very quickly,
We've
you
been
know?
That adaptive signal control specifically for you.
That's right,
Andy.
that's what I knew, exactly.
I got Alderman Speedy.
Sure, and looking at, obviously, we're looking at a 10-year plan, and we know in 3 years, the sales tax coming back to the city. Is this gonna is that gonna come into the funding source discussion, or can we anticipate a percentage of that increase can go towards capital improvement projects?
Yeah, as we do the modeling and the financial work further in the process, that's absolutely something we will look at, is that sales tax coming to the city 3 years out. And then
The TIF.
the TIF will retire
right.
around 2022, we think,
uh-huh,
at this point. Plus, there's money owed back to the city for money it advanced. And then the TIF will become a general fund funding
That's right.
source. So what I will tell you on that is we need to look at that and make some assumptions, and we'll talk through that with you about how much of that to allocate to capital and how much, I would suggest some portion needs to be held for operational needs, just as we grow. So we'll work with you on making some assumption on how to allocate that, but that will definitely be part of our funding sources and capacity as we look at it.
And it's important to keep in mind that the financial impact that you saw today is a cash number only, okay? So that we forecast roughly, and we're still refining this, and we wanted to wait until we're a little further along with the audit. The auditors are in here today, starting for fiscal 18. What we can, what we keep sort of our powder dry for future cash capital needs, grant matching needs, but then what we can leverage. So we were intentionally vague. We didn't give you numbers today about what's coming from what source, because we want to leverage everything we can, whether it be public-private partnerships or particular parkland dedication quadrant monies or particular road impact quadrant monies. Once we get a little bit deeper and we know what you want for your next level prioritization, then we can fully leverage what makes sense, as well as looking at the next version of a debt capacity model.
Eric and I had discussed today at a meeting, possibly just doing this every Monday in
I will be
October.
out of town at least one time, maybe more than that already,
Okay.
I know.
Well, I'm getting no on one and I'm getting a yes on another. So maybe we'll just send out that survey to try to lock in those dates, but try to do one a week for 4 weeks.
I can do the last 4 weeks.
We'll just send out a survey and
Yeah.
find
We can make
out.
Yeah. And like I said, 2-hour window maximum, we'll try to keep it to that.
I'll be here whenever you schedule.
All right, very good.
Anything else? No. We're done. Thanks for your attendance, patience, comments,
Thank you.
and the stretch break.